Good morning, everybody, and welcome to this Information and Matchmaking Day, which is especially dedicated to the European Collaborative Cloud for Cultural Heritage. I am Irene Norstedt. I'm the Director for the People Directorate in DG Research and Innovation, and we are leading this development of the Collaborative Cloud of Cultural Heritage. It is a flagship initiative of Horizon Europe, and it aims to help the cultural heritage sector to take full advantage of the opportunities of the digital transition. And I hope that the cloud, when implemented, really will bring new dimension into the work among Europe's cultural heritage institutions, opening new avenues for research, for collaboration, and of course for innovation. Today in the meeting, there will be an in-depth presentation of the two core topics that are currently open. You will have the possibility to ask questions to my colleagues, and they will try to answer you to their best abilities. I would encourage you to really take this opportunity. And in addition, you can also ask questions later on through our national contact points or through the Research Inquiry Service on the European Commission's website. After lunch, you are cordially invited to the afternoon session, where there also is a brokerage event. And here you will be able to interact with other interested potential applicants and to help you form very strong project consortia. And with this, I wish you a very nice and productive day. As I said, do take the opportunity to ask the questions you may have. It's a new, very innovative and visual project, so we very much appreciate that you are here today. And with that, I hand over to Harald Hartung, who will moderate the session this morning. And I wish you all a very good day.
Well, thank you very much, Irene. Dear ladies and gentlemen, a very warm welcome from Brussels to our Info Day meeting on the Cultural Heritage Cloud. My name is Harald Hartung. I'm the head of unit in charge of Fairs, Societies and Cultural Heritage, and I will moderate the morning session of today. Let me just recall our program of this morning. After the introduction, we will go directly into the call for proposals 2023 for the Heritage Cloud with two topics. You will have an in-depth presentation of this, and after this, we will have time for questions and answers. And let me already mention that the questions and answers session will be done via Slido, and I believe that you will now see also on the screen the QR code and the address of Slido. So please scan the QR code, and through this you can then send your questions to us. After the questions and answers session, we will then have a lunch break, and after the lunch break we will have the matchmaking exercise so that you can find partners for submitting proposals to us for the Cultural Heritage Cloud. Now, this Info Day on the Cultural Heritage Cloud is not a one-off thing. It is placed into a long series of events and information. Let me just recall a few landmarks in this. It started with the expert report on the needs and the challenges for such a cultural heritage cloud of last May, followed by a meeting of ministers from the member states to make sure that we will have governance through the member states for this cultural heritage cloud. In autumn, we had a survey with more than 1,000 respondents from the cultural heritage sector on what are their needs for the cloud. This year, on the 22nd of January, we had our General Information Day on the call for proposals for 2023. And last but not least, on the 15th of March, we had our meeting on a cultural heritage cloud for all. And today the meeting is specifically focused on the first phase of setting up the Cultural Heritage Cloud, with mainly two areas we will cover. One is the setting up of the infrastructure of the Cultural Heritage Cloud, and the second topic deals with the visible and non-visible characteristics of cultural heritage objects. And now, without any further ado, let me introduce the colleagues here in the studio, and I take them in order of appearance. The first colleague is Richard Buchs, who is one of the main drafters of this call, together with Søren Bovard, who brought in particular also his experience with similar projects in other areas. They will do the presentation of the two topics. And the third person here in the studio is Agnes Hedgevarine-Nudge. And Agnes is from our research executive agency, and she's the specialist on all the proposals, the projects, what are the things you should observe as far as procedures and rules are concerned, and she will be available for questions related to these topics. And after having introduced our speakers of this morning, I now hand directly over to Richard to start guiding us through the two topics. Richard, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. And before diving into the specifics of the currently open call topics, let's take a small step back. As Irene, our director, said this morning, the Collaborative Cloud for Cultural Heritage is, you could say, the flagship initiative of Horizon Europe to support the cultural heritage sector to take advantage of the digital transition as far as possible. This collaborative cloud platform should facilitate cooperation, co-creation, the reuse of data. It should open new possibilities for research and for innovation, and it should support cooperation with the cultural and creative industries and many other things. The platform should be inclusive and also involve small and rural institutions which may have less resources, and it should be designed to be sustainable in the long term, allowing for a continuous improvement cycles. All in all, I think we can agree that this is a very ambitious project, but which can also make a real difference. So, next slide, please. All this will not happen at once, of course. It is important to keep in mind, I think, that this is a large and long-term initiative. Horizon Europe plays an important role, but research and innovation actions must be accompanied by political actions to ensure the support of member states and also by outreach efforts to engage with the future user community. Today we will discuss the first collaborative cloud call, which is currently open, with two call topics, but further calls are then foreseen to be published in 2024, in 2025, and possibly beyond that. Next slide, please. The focus of this year's call is on building the foundation for the collaborative cloud platform, both the technical foundation and the governance. We can call this the basic platform. On top of this, we also include funding for two basic tools in this year's call. In 2024, the focus will be on developing more basic tools for the cloud in order to make it user-friendly, powerful, and attractive for the end users. In 2025, the focus will be on piloting real use cases, testing and improving the platform. So now, after this very quick overview, let's go into the 2023 call topics. Next slide, please. The first call topic has the critical task of establishing the basic platform for the European Collaborative Cloud for Cultural Heritage. It is an innovation action with a preliminary budget of 25 million euros. And with this budget, we foresee to fund one project. And perhaps also worth mentioning in this context is that it is a lump sum topic, so you need to take this into account when you prepare the proposal. But let's go further into the details and move to the next slide. The expected outcomes indicate high expectations, you could say, which are necessary for the collaborative cloud to be successful. The aim is to develop and implement the basic architecture of the platform and to establish its governance. The governance structure should coordinate the different projects. It should ensure proper involvement of stakeholders and representatives of other relevant initiatives. And it should also make sure that the cloud platform is designed to be extended and improved over time. By the end of the project, the collaborative cloud for cultural heritage should be established as a legal entity with an appropriate structure to involve a wide range of stakeholders and also to cooperate with other relevant initiatives. Let's move on to the next slide. You could say that overall goal is to define, to extend and accelerate the development of a platform for multidisciplinary and multi-sectoral collaboration on cultural heritage, focusing on users' requirements and the ease of use, as well as underpinning an open digital ecosystem that provides the tools and services needed to enable and scale up future research and innovation in the field. A pan-European network of key stakeholders is needed so that the development of the platform is user-driven. A framework for long-term access and preservation of data is an important feature that has to be built into the platform. We estimate that the project should run for at least 5 years in order to be able to properly incorporate the results from the future collaborative cloud actions. Let's move on to the next slide. There are a few special conditions which are important to keep in mind. There are 2 additional eligibility conditions, which means that if you don't fulfill these conditions, the project cannot be funded. On the one hand, proposals must include an outline of previously funded projects in areas which are relevant to the European Collaborative Cloud for Cultural Heritage. On the other hand, the proposals must also outline a business plan for the collaborative cloud after the end of the project funding. These conditions are there to make sure that proposals start working on these issues from the very beginning. There are also a few exceptions to standard rules that are important to keep in mind, I think. One is the strong discouragement to dedicate significant parts of the project budget to hardware or commercial software. We think that the project must be focused on the essentials described in the topic, and long-term sustainable solutions must be found to have a platform to run on the cloud without relying on project funding for this. Financial support to third parties is allowed, for example, to facilitate involvement of stakeholders. All software should be open source with some exceptions possible under certain conditions, and only one project can be funded. So let's move on to the following slide. And here, as you can see, many things are required of the project to be funded under this topic. And at this point, I would maybe ask my colleague Søren here, what would you say is the most important aspect?
Experience we have is that this cloud platform should operate as a business. It's absolutely essential that there is a plan for how it's going to operate sustainably after the setting up. And the legal entity in reality determines all the underlying structures. That means the governance, who owns what, how can we handle IPR, the operation of businesses between the different beneficiaries in the project, and so on and so forth, and also the interaction with the stakeholders outside the project. And that means that you have to start with the setting up of the legal entity very, very early in the project, basically from the start, because the experience shows that it takes at least 6 months just to do the legal part of the setting up of this framework. And if you don't start at the beginning, then it's very difficult to get the agreement with all the beneficiaries. So that for me is a very first thing. And then of course, as I said from the start, it needs a long-term sustainable business plan.
That's true. Without a sustainable business plan, and the cloud platform will not survive in the long term. And this is why I suppose that proposals are expected to include an outline of such a business plan in the proposal, right?
It's essential to include an outline of a business plan. It's actually an eligibility criteria in the call topic. Of course, this cannot be the full-fledged business plan. This business plan should be refined during the project, and then at the end of the project, it should be rolled out to the project so that they can continue beyond or working beyond the commission funding.
Besides the legal entity and the long-term sustainable business model, projects are also requested to set up and run the governance of the entire initiative. In your view, what would be important to keep in mind there?
I think that there are many reasons, but one of the reasons is that it's incredibly important to have a strong governance in a project like this, because it will have a lasting effect on all the projects that are coming later on. So they need to structure what comes on and to ensure that there is a wide engagement with the stakeholders outside. Because unless you have a community, customers out there, it's not going to be sustainable. So you have to set the rules for these interactions, and they have to be set in stone, and it's something that doesn't come by itself. It's also an important aspect that it's done through a single entry point. You could not have different entry points, different kinds of things that you have to go in and remember. It has to be open, accessible for everyone. And then I think one of the important aspects that were written into the topic is that it has to be guided by an independent expert board to give them advice on how things can be done. Also because it's an iterative process that is not coming by itself from day one.
There's a provision in the call topic that clearly states that proposals should foresee coordination actions and budget for this. And all other collaborative cloud topics have corresponding requirements to let themselves be coordinated by this project. But how should this coordination work in detail?
Well, I think that it's an important aspect of the overall governance to have this coordination. Because if you do not coordinate with all the other projects that are being funded at the same time, but also are coming later, you cannot control the development overall. So it's important to have as many activities to run in parallel to be able to do this and to develop and test functionalities in this cloud program. So yes, we are asking for the coordination, but we are not determining inside the call topic exactly how this should be done. This is up to the proposers to come with a proposal for this.
So let me, besides governance and coordination, maybe I should also mention that the project must develop and also implement the basic platform, the basic architecture, the data models, the application programming interfaces, the documentation standards, testing protocols, the user interface standards, etc. Basically, the entire design of the basic cloud platform and its implementation.
Yeah, but that's the reason that you have this coordination action facility inside the project, and you also are supposed to have a budget for running this. So they need to coordinate not only the projects that are running inside the first cloud platform, but also with all the other projects later on to ensure this basic steering. But again, as I said, how the coordination is done in detail, that's up to the proposers to determine this. The topic does not specify this. But apart from this governance and coordination, there are many other activities that needs to start at the beginning. Yeah?
Yeah, I also wanted to comment on that this need for the tool, it's important, but at the same time as the basic platform, we have also chosen to start the development of tools for the platform. And of course, these tools need the specifications, the application programming interfaces, etc., to be developed. And we have chosen to launch this to work in parallel because the tool development will do have large parts which do not necessarily have a platform running in order for it to do. So in order to ensure that it works, we have a head start, and also that the project is, you could say, collaborative project from the outset, involving more than one project. We've chosen to do it in this way. Another question, there is a limitation to how much budget can be spent on hardware, right?
Yes.
So how should the project mobilize storage capacity and processing power to run the collaborative cloud on?
Well, I think that there's no directly good answer for this, because it's true that we prefer not to have significant budgets put available for software and the hardware, like for instance memory and storage and drives and computers that are associated, but a minimum needs to be there. And that is absolutely clear, and that's why we use the term significant. That means that in reality it's up to the proposals to determine what is actually needed as a minimum to be able to run this cloud. And then it's up to the evaluators to evaluate, or the experts to evaluate, how this is being done inside the project in a reasonably sustainable way. And also the significant does come with a margin of maneuver, but that's on purpose.
To ensure a high quality cloud platform, another aspect of the governance is that the tools and applications have to be tested and integrated, right? So this is again one of the responsibilities of these projects. And this is both technical and it's about governance. And in a way, the governance body of this project becomes the ultimate guarantor, you could say, of the quality and consistency of the platform. So therefore, another important aspect is that the governance body is isolated from the other parts of the project. So to be objective and to be independent and driven by the users of the platform. Funding to third parties is allowed to a certain degree, at least. What would you like to comment on this? Why is this?
I think that the funding for third parties allows small actors, small stakeholders to interact directly with the project. And that's actually an asset for the project itself, because then you get real cases that can be tested and demonstrated inside the project, while you're at the same time you're engaging your community. Because if you have no community, you have no customers, then you have no sustainable business plan, and then you have nothing at the end. So it's really important to do this as the widest possible extent, that you take in, for instance, small SMEs, small museums that have a case that can be used directly in the project to test all these things. They may not have the means, and that's why we have this funding for third parties.
The project is also required to set up a common website for the entire initiative. Why is this? Well, we think this is important to keep all initiative together. So all subsequent collaborative cloud projects are in turn required to use this common website. Last but maybe not least, there's also a recommendation on the project duration.
Yeah.
Why is this, would you say? Why do we say that it should run for at least 5 years?
Well, I think that to be accurate, I think that inside the proposal it says approximately 5 years. So it's an approximation. So 5 years is simply to set up such a complicated structure and to make sure that the legal entity is set up and that everything is working and tested. That's something that you don't do from one day to the other. And that's why we determined that probably around 5 years is needed to be able to do this. And then to have the common website is actually really important, because then you can see the developments on one web page, and the projects have an easier task to coordinate with each other. So.
Thank you very much. So with this, I hope it is a little bit clearer what is requested of projects under this topic. And let's move on quickly to the next slide. And so the second call topic of the 2023 call, the aims to develop and implement 2 initial sets of tools for the cloud platform to be integrated into the collaborative cloud platform. This is a research and innovation action with a preliminary budget of 10 million euros. And with this budget, we hope to fund 2 projects. As the previous topic, this is also a lump sum topic. And now let's go into a little bit more of details on this call topic. Next slide, please. The 2 sets of tools are related to the digitization of cultural heritage objects, both in terms of visible and non-visible characteristics. The objective is both to provide useful tools for the target users of the collaborative cloud, but also to demonstrate how such tools can be built and integrated into the basic platform, using the resources of the basic platform, its application programming interfaces, its graphical user interfaces, etc. The idea is that such tools should be through cloud services. They should not require the user to download or install software, ideally, and also not particularly powerful hardware. In principle, it should be possible to take advantage of these powerful features of the cloud platform with a standard computer and a web browser. This will be the first set of tools developed for the collaborative cloud. And as I mentioned earlier, it should be followed by several more under the 2024 work program of Horizon Europe. So, said this.
So you actually have a project which is much less complex than the previous one, isn't it? True.
It's true. That's probably right. Even if what these projects have to achieve is also pretty challenging. But here we aim at funding 2 projects, right?
Yes. You said that from the start. I mean, we have a budget of 10 million euros, and we estimate that each of them will cost around 5 to 6 million euros. That means we can have 2 projects. But it's really important to have something that runs in parallel and that can be coordinated together, so that we are sure that we cover all the bases for the needs of the overall platform. And then they can complement each other and work closely to be sure that the best ideas are coming through inside the project. So you said earlier that this would run directly in parallel, but how do you foresee that this is done? I mean, they start at the same time as the cloud platform.
That's correct. We decided to launch the development of these 2 basic tools, as I think I mentioned at some point, at the same time as the platform. And for these particular tools, there is a significant part of work which can be done without the cloud platform in place. And that's the reason we decided to launch this call topic at the same time, in order to get a head start in the tool development and also to make sure that the initiative takes shape as a collaborative effort involving several projects from the very beginning. And with this, let's move on to the open for questions.
Well, thank you very much, Rickard, and thank you very much, Søren, for having set out 2 very complex and difficult topics in a more easy, understandable way. Thank you very much for this. And as you might have heard in the presentations, well, with this call and with the two first topics, we leave a little bit the usual framework of what we do in Cluster 2, because we go beyond what we normally do. This time, we really want to combine the social sciences and humanities with the technical sciences in order to really construct a very complex project. This is really an important thing, and that is also the reason why the running period of this call is now open until the 21st of September, in order to give you sufficient time, on the one hand, to form solid consortia, and secondly also to make solid proposals with a very long-term goal of sustainability. Now, the floor is open for questions, and let me recall to you that we've got our QR code on the slides, so please scan them if you want to ask questions. And we have already received a first set of questions, and I will read out the first one to you. Can you clarify what relationships are expected between the cloud and other existing initiatives and platforms like Europeana, the ongoing data space for cultural heritage? I think I can already start giving a first element of the answer, and then my colleagues will complement me. From the very beginning onwards, we have worked together with our colleagues dealing with Europeana as well as with the cultural heritage data space. Let me just recall that also in the drafting team, we had colleagues from the different services dealing with Europeana and the data space to make sure that we can create complementarity, that we avoid duplication, and that we also avoid gaps. More concretely, what is being set out in the cultural heritage data space as principles will, of course, be followed and also applied within the cultural heritage cloud. And with the colleagues from Europeana, we are in close contact to give you one example, to work on training for cultural heritage experts as far as their digital skills are concerned. They have already, with Europeana, launched first training, and we will complement this with further trainings. So by this, we want to make sure that we complement each other and that there is no duplication. I don't know if colleagues would like to add something on this.
No, I think that you've already covered all the bases. We basically expect them to work very closely together, and that we avoid the overlaps. That is clear from what you said.
Maybe I can add that this is also specified actually in the call topics. We don't specify in details how the relation should work, but we do request from projects to take these other initiatives into account and to the extent appropriate build on them and work together. Not only with Europeana, also with other relevant initiatives like the European Open Science Cloud, for example.
Thanks very much. And I now move already to the second question, and I read it out to you. You mentioned that on top of the two basic tools in the 2023 Research and Innovation Action Call, more tools will be developed in 2024. Is the call for the 2024 tools published? When? Who would like to take this?
As far as I recall, they will be published at the end of 23 or beginning of 24. It's probably going to be at the beginning of 24 because we cannot make the amendment to the work program before. But as the calls will be in September, likely 24, then it will not have any impact on the time given to the proposals. I think that's probably also correct from your side, isn't it?
Yeah, thanks very much, Søren. I think this is very clear. And let me just recall that this is now the first call for our cloud. In this first call, we focus on setting up the infrastructure for the cloud, and we also work with one topic of one tool. In 2024, we will focus on the tools and on the services we want to put on the cultural heritage cloud. And in 2025, we will do a first test of pilot projects in order to see what works well, what needs to be further improved. So this would be more or less, in a nutshell, the work plan for the next 3 years. Now I go to the next question. Are there already examples for similar governance structures that could be used as a blueprint? I could imagine that this question goes to you, Søren.
Thank you, Harald. Indeed, when we wrote these topics together, we needed to have some kind of example that could be used, and we actually used the example that came from the open innovation test beds that have been running in the industrial technologies domain, and also of the open innovation, no, not the open innovation, the innovation hubs that were running by our colleagues from DG Connect, and they actually used these kind of structures for setting up a legal entity and to build these things together. So there is actually quite a lot of expertise out there already, and I think that we already at one of the early meetings that we had on the cloud, there was a presentation by a couple of experts that have been working in these fields that explained how these things can be put together.
Thank you very much, Søren. This leads us already to the next question, and this is concerning the independent advisory board. These experts would not be part of the proposal, ? Would they also be financed by the basic infrastructure project? Who would like to take this one?
I think I can take that. Indeed, the experts should not be part directly of the proposal, but it does not mean that they cannot be financed by the project, because there needs to be financing for engaging with these experts during the course of the 5 years, for instance, that the project will run, so that they can give guidance. But that would normally be on an expert on a daily basis, that they come in and give their expert advice. So yes, they can, in principle, be funded by the project.
And that would mean that in the proposal you need to provide for a structure where you can host these experts, but you do not already at this point in time already define the names of the persons who will be there.
No, not necessarily.
Okay.
I mean, if they have some obvious candidates for this, I don't think that it precludes anything, but it's not something that is specified in the call that they have to be there. They just have to specify how they're going to operate this board with the independent experts.
Thank you, Søren. Next question. How large do you expect the consortium for the first topic to be?
Well, it's of course up to the proposals to determine how large the consortium will be, but it's clear that it's not going to be a very small consortium. It's likely going to have many different parts of the project onto specific projects or onto specific beneficiaries. So if I should sort of just on the top of my head think about projects in a similar way, then they normally have in the order of 20, perhaps even more partners or beneficiaries involved. And that is very clear when you have a project of this complexity that you're going to have that. Of course, you should not make it too complex with too many beneficiaries, because then a project in itself becomes impossible to handle. So it's up to the consortium, to the proposers to determine how many there should be there, but they should cover all the bases in the call.
Yeah. So I think there are two things you need to combine. One is think big, and secondly, although you think big, you still must make it operational. next question. You mentioned for topic 02 that the results are expected to be cloud services, but advanced digitization may need specific sensors, etc., and thus client-side tools. Richard.
Yes, this may be correct. What we are saying is that as far as possible, the tools developed for the cloud platform should be cloud services. But this does not mean that it may need other sensors, they may need to connect to other sensors, may need some, in certain cases, software to download. So it's not an absolute prohibition, but it's a target picture, let's say. No?
Thank you. I go to the next question. The impression, what was the hardware costs were not eligible. 25 million euros is the maximum for the project for 5 years. Setting up a cloud is way more expensive than 25 million euro. I think we do already have some experience with different infrastructures, not in the field of cultural heritage, but in other fields. And there, I think, Søren, you can give us some, share with us some of your experience in this field.
Yeah, indeed, Harald. The impression is actually wrong that hardware costs are not eligible. Of course, hardware costs will be eligible, but we are saying that they should not be a significant amount of the overall budget. And it's up to the consortium and the proposers to determine how much is needed to do the basic thing. I think that the other thing about this is also that we know that setting up this cloud over many years will take more than 25 million euro if it should cover all the aspects we're talking about and the whole of Europe. But we are not building from scratch. We're building on projects which are already running, national initiatives, Europeana, the data space, which already have funding for this. So we know that some of these elements are already out there. And then, of course, they should be pooled together so that we can take advantage of the capacity of all the beneficiaries of all the projects that are running throughout Europe in this case.
Thank you. Now I go to the next one. What is planned to ensure that the customers, like museums, are directly participated in the design of the platform and the further development? Now let me give you first part of the answer and then my colleagues will come in. We have now, in the running up to the clouds, launched the building of a community of practice. We've started with this through a survey of the needs and the challenges for our customers, namely the cultural heritage researchers and museums. We have received more than 1,000 replies for this. On the 15th of March, we had a big event called A Cloud for All, where we wanted to give, first of all, examples of what could be hosted on the cloud. And secondly, in the second part of the meeting, we discussed how to build up this community of practice, because what is important for us is that it responds to the needs of the researchers, to the needs of the museums. And although some of the functions might be rather complex, it should still be possible to handle this through a notebook. With this, I hand over to the colleagues because they're also in the topic in itself. It is foreseen to have specific structures to respond to the needs and to get the views of the users in order to include it in the infrastructure and in the specific tools. Rickard, you could start and then maybe Søren, if you want to complement.
I can start and elaborate a little bit. In the topic, we do have certain elements specified, but most of the how is up to the applicant to define. What we do underline very much is the importance of engaging the end users in the design of the platform and the further development. through, as we have discussed before, stakeholder communities and advisory boards, etc. Maybe Søren, you will like to
I think that
answer a little bit.
To add on what Richard is saying, we actually put this funding for third parties into the topic with a specific aim to engage with the community, so that museums, also small SMEs or stakeholders out there, would not need to come with their own money or be direct part of the project from the start. And then they could be getting a little bit of money to demonstrate that it works for them, and also that the functionality of the whole thing works. So that should give a dynamic community, and I think that that's important for the sustainability of the overall cloud and the community building in total.
Thank you. Now the next question. The 2 projects funded by the second call could suffer from delays in the realization of the basic infrastructure of the first call. How to manage this? I think this is a very practical question.
Yeah.
Well, there is of course not an easy answer to this question at this point of time. What we have been saying is that the parallel development of these projects requires a lot from the governance, requires a lot of coordination, close coordination between the projects. And hopefully this will be a way to mitigate such risks, which may happen.
But I also think that one of the first things that need to be determined inside the basic cloud architecture is how the application programming interfaces will run.
Yeah.
And as soon as you have them, then you also know how to enter data into your platform. And so if that is available, then it should not matter that there may be certain aspects of the platform that will be delayed one way or the other. Of course, it will have an effect on everyone if there are delays, but that's why we have a steering and an independent advisory board to help with advice for these things, so that we can avoid these kind of delays and to use the capacities that are out there. As we already said, I mean, we know that there are several initiatives which are running, which are similar and which have had the same kind of problem. So it should not be rocket science in the end.
Thank you. I now move to the next question. What is the expected governance of data in such a platform? Should it be open sourced by the users? Who is the expected owner of the new generated data? I think that's a very relevant question, and my colleagues have thought very much about this when putting together the topic. Who would like to start? Richard.
Maybe I can start. And the philosophy of the cloud in terms of IPR rights is that the cloud should facilitate, should make it possible to apply different models in terms of ownership, and the owner of the data is the one that should decide if it is something available to everyone, open source, or if it is restricted and under which conditions it can be licensed or used. And we also expect the governance to come up with, let's say, standardized schemes for how this should work, especially in cooperation with entities outside that are not part of the cloud itself. No, I hope this is part of the answer at least. No.
Thank you very much. Now, the next question. To what extent national archival institutions could participate in the present call? Will future calls be more specific, better suited for this type of institutions? Now, first element of the reply is yes, please participate. Second element of the reply is the big challenge of, in particular, the infrastructure is that it should be fit for all kind of cultural heritage. And this is not only artifacts, not only buildings, but these archives in particular are a very important part as far as the information linked to the different objects are concerned, which should be linked to this. So archives will be an important partner in this. And this goes for the infrastructure as well as for the individual topics on the services and the tools we will present in particular in 2024. But also the second topic for 2023 is also something which also applies to archives. Any additional points you would like to add to this one?
I think you covered it.
Thank you.
Well, Harald.
Thank you. Then next point, the lump sum funding model is neither very flexible nor practical for large consortia. What was the thinking behind asking for lump sum in these two topics? Well, the reason why I'm smiling is because we had very heavy internal discussions about this. So maybe my colleagues could share the thinking behind.
Yeah. I think that I will have to take a part of the blame for this because what we've seen in earlier infrastructure programs is that it makes sense to have a lump sum. So that when you're building a large infrastructure, and this is a large infrastructure with several steps like in a 3-stage rocket, you know, then it's very nice to have a lump sum funding in this so that when you've done your first step, then you can get funding for that. And if you cannot go about the first step, then the project just stops there because there's no more funding. So we need to make sure that when we're investing so much money in this, that it also is planned from the start and it just doesn't run out into the sand. So yes, lump sum may seem inflexible, but there is still a flexibility inbuilt in this so that you can shift budget if it turns out that certain parts become a little bit more expensive than other parts. But we want to make sure that there is a planning that goes ahead for this. And that's the basic reason. And that also goes for the second topic. So that if we can see that the application is not working or cannot work inside the structure, then of course we should only pay so much as which is being delivered.
Thank you. Now, the next question, how to balance the cloud with green climate change issues? Some requirements will be integrated in the calls.
Should I say a few words on this? There's no specific provisions linked to the Green Deal objectives or to climate neutrality in the call topics, but there are general provisions for Horizon Europe, and these are the ones that should be taken into account. No? And linked to climate change and cultural heritage, you may also see a role for the cloud in a place to safeguard digital versions, digital copies of cultural heritage objects that may be threatened by climate change.
And it may actually sort of prevent all these, exhibitions to be transported around the world where you can possibly do the exhibit as a digital version. That's a possibility, and that would save the CO2 footprint.
I see then the next question, do you expect the cloud to later on let users pay for the services offered?
I think that's a yes, isn't it? I think that you cannot have any sustainability unless there is a user community for which you can ask money for this. To the extent, of course, is up to the proposals for this project. But for me, it has to have some kind of user payment inside this, because otherwise it would only be the Commission or those that are funding the project for the sustainability for the future. But again, we are not determining this. This is just in my mind that it will not be possible without having some kind of user payment.
Yes, maybe I'd like to elaborate a little bit that, as Søren said, we do not specify how the economic model or long-term economic model of the cloud should look like. It has to be developed closely with the end users, and it has to allow also for users with little resources to take part. I don't think there's a clear answer to yes and no here. It has to be paid for somehow. It has to, but maybe not directly through users, maybe through authorities who support the users, etc. But it's a question to work on during the lifetime of the project.
So, thank you. And as you can see there, there is not a clear yes or no. It will really depend on your proposal and on the feasibility of the proposed funding for the proposal. And this leads to the next question I wanted to say, but now it has switched because the question was, in the long run, by whom will the cloud financed? And I think there, what we can do on our part is that we have the funding through the first 3 calls for proposals for 23, 24, 25. And as my colleagues have mentioned, these projects, in particular the big infrastructure projects, can envisage a running period with EU funding for about 5 years. But it is also clear that there will not be an eternal funding through the European Commission, and that step by step, also the member states need to step in. When I say need to step in, it does not necessarily mean that this will cost huge sums of money, but it would, for example, mean that also there would be an important element of contributions in kind to keep the project not only alive, but to further develop it. And I think that the biggest hurdle, namely to get this whole thing started, is something which will be financed through the Commission. Now, I see that it is still difficult to understand how much resources would be needed for the hardware, software. Are there examples to look at? Søren, I think you've got the answer.
Well, I don't have the full answer, but the examples to look at would be, for instance, the digital innovation hubs and also the open innovation test beds. And I think that already some of the national projects which are running, or Europeana, will know how much they need to put on these to make sure that some kind of infrastructure can run. There will be ample national expertise inside this field, as far as I know. But otherwise, use the examples from the digital innovation hubs.
Thank you. And I see that the financing question is coming back. In a Cloud for All event last week, Commissioner Gabriel stressed the cloud is also for smaller museums, archives. How are they supposed to pay for the cloud services? So I think that, and this is also mentioned in the topic in itself, it should be open to all kinds of museums and research institutions, and in particular it should encourage the participation of the smaller ones, which also means that, of course, there will be a certain hurdle as far as additional financing by the small ones is concerned, and that is exactly one of the points we expect the ones who submit proposals, that they tackle it, that on the one hand they can come up with views on the long-term running of the cloud, and at the same time keep it open, and in particular for the small ones, so that they are not discouraged. I could then move to the next one, which is, do you plan to have calls to tools processing textual content too? All of European libraries and archives are excluded from the cloud if 3D is an entry condition.
Should I start, maybe.
Yes, please, Rick.
Well, first of all, I have to say that 3D is absolutely no entry condition. The cloud platform is to be used for all types of cultural heritage that can somehow be represented in a digital form, which of course include the data libraries and archives. We do have more calls coming up, and of course a component of some of these will have to deal with processing of textual content, but you should really look at this as a platform for all types of cultural heritage. None of it is excluded. Maybe you want to add something, Søren?
No, I think that you covered it well, Richard.
So this leads us to the next question. Whom do you expect as basic applicants? Strongly from ICT. This might also refer to what I've mentioned at the beginning of our discussions, that with this call for proposals, we leave the traditional scope of our cluster, namely only to work with social sciences and humanities, because in this one we combine what we call the SSH and the STEM community. Now, would my colleagues have additional points to add to this?
I think that it's clear that you're going to have a very wide community in this, and you have the museum professionals on one side with all that entails, but you're going to need to have people that are experts in the setting up of specific ICT, so they will have to work together. So there's no set rules for this, as you just point out, but it's going to be a mixture of beneficiaries.
Yeah, I think that is a fair assessment. Now, one other point, a very practical one, is that the institutions will deliver directly their data on the platform, ? Or aggregators will be needed, as it is for the data space for cultural heritage and Europeana.
Yes. I would try to put it like this, that there's no decision taken from our side how the organization around the cloud infrastructure should look like. This is something we believe will have to be decided and developed by the users, by the stakeholders themselves, along with the development of the platform. But we don't foresee the same need. Also small, let's say not resource-intensive institutions should be able to interact directly with the cloud platform. So probably the need will not be so pronounced to have aggregators, but we cannot say at this point how it will work.
The next question. Third parties like SMEs, museums with ECCCH cases would need to be defined at application stage or later after the project approval. I think this links up with what Søren has mentioned already when he presented part of the topic, also with the cascading funding and questions related to this. Søren, maybe you can elaborate on this point.
I think that there's no set for the third parties to come with the user cases. If it was me, I would probably come up with a few already defined cases where you knew that you could illustrate what you're going to do. But then for the rest of the third party interaction, it's usually being organized by calls, as it is in the cascading funding traditionally. Between the institutions, so that there will be a call by the project for new use cases that can be taken up inside the project and to demonstrate specific things. And that also allows the project to structure a little bit what it is that they would like to see demonstrated. Not that it will be determined from the start, but it's clear that if you have 100 that are having one specific use case and you have none for the rest, then you need to distribute the use cases appropriately.
Thank you very much. And the next question now is, how will you make sure that the voice of smaller institutions that might use this cloud is heard? Let us divide it into two parts. One is the running up to the cloud, and the other part is how will it be run once the cloud will be implemented. In the running up to the cloud, I have mentioned that we've really tried very hard to reach out to all our stakeholders, meaning all our researchers and museum community throughout Europe. And I think so far we have been successful in reaching out to them, and secondly also to get their feedback. And this has been set out in our cloud survey, where we have really asked what is the need, what are the challenges, where do the museums and research institutions need help to get a first idea about these things. And the second element is, as we have mentioned on the 15th of March in our event, that we are now building up a users community. And let me recall, to this end, we have now, some 2 weeks ago, set up a specific web page on the cloud where we will regularly share information. We will, in regular intervals, launch workshops and seminars on specific issues related to the cloud. And we will also, in a step-by-step approach, through the web page, reply to all the questions you have put via Slido at our big event on the 15th of March, where we had more than 1,000 participants. So this is the part in the running up to the cloud. Now I turn to my colleagues. What does that mean for the cloud infrastructure, and how could this very important issue be handled?
Well, I could perhaps add that it is very clearly stated in the call topics that smaller institutions should be included and thought of as end users, and should also be included in the development of the platform and the tools. One specific aspect is this target picture that I mentioned, that the tools developed should be cloud services, which do not require neither special hardware or capacities of the end users, as far as this is possible. Maybe Søren, you want to compliment?
Well, I think that you're covering most of the bases, but I'll just again point to the cascading funding and to the funding support for third parties, because the small actors will usually come in throughout the project, and it's clear that the way that they see the success of the tools will also determine the future for the whole platform. So it gives by itself that they will have an important voice throughout the program and throughout the project lifetime.
Thank you. I move to the next one. Will the project funded in the first call be allowed or expected to produce large data sets as well? If so, these come from the use cases of third parties? Question mark.
Well, you can start and then I can extend.
I'm not 100% sure I understand the question correctly, but the first project is expected to set up the platform to be used. So in principle, I don't think we expect this project to generate large data sets of its own, let's say. So it will basically come from the users of the cloud platform. Now, these users may, of course, be partners of the projects partially, and maybe third parties, or even not linked directly formally to the projects. Maybe you want to complement that, Søren?
No, I think I cannot comment on that. You basically covered the whole thing as far as I see.
I take the next one. Topic 1 proposal. Where to include the mandatory outline of previous projects, business plan, in part B, standard limit of 50 pages for lump sum in IAs. I think that was also a subject area we have been discussing quite a lot, because it's a complex subject matter, and yeah, one could really ask oneself, well, can you do this within 50 pages? Agnes, could you give us advice on this question?
Part A as well, because for each participant there's a space where they can describe 5 previous projects and also their other experience, infrastructure or linked data sets. So I strongly suggest that each participant uses the Part A information as much as possible. And then obviously the business plan needs to be outlined in the Part B. It's not defined where exactly and to what extent, but yes, within the 50 pages you have to fit all this information. It has to be an outline only, so think it over as to what is the framework that should be defined for the proposal stage.
Many thanks, Agnes. I take the next question. Can you give some examples of museums' involvement in the third-party funding? Søren, would you have any fantasy to give us, maybe to construct an example?
I mean, we have used this kind of cascading funding for the digital innovation hubs, and it was very often small SMEs or small actors that had a problem that they needed to solve. And I think that many of the elements here are the same. So if you are a small museum and you want to make sure that you can digitize your objects or part of the manuscripts that you have available, then this would be the obvious place to go if you do not have your own funding for these kind of things. So for me, that would be very obvious, like a small independent museum, a private funding perhaps, that does not have the kind of capacity to do this by themselves, and they could be part of this.
Should this already be included in the proposal which is being submitted, or is it simply the opportunity, the facility that this can happen?
I think that it depends on how much the consortium has these kind of things available already from the start. And there the matchmaking that we're having this afternoon is an important part of this, because then we should see or hope to see some of these use cases come up that could be added as third parties inside the proposal.
Okay. Thanks very much. And this leads us to the next question, which is linked to the matchmaking. And there, I also wonder if the matchmaking meetings will continue or not, because I'm still pending for a response from the other partners. I think, Agnes, this is for you.
For sure. So yes, the matchmaking meetings will continue until the co-closure, until September. So that's one of the benefits of our current online tool, which is managed by the NCP project, that it's continuously open. So don't worry if you haven't got a response yet, because this time frame given for this afternoon is just for this event, but actually the platform will be kept open, and then you can expect a response at any time. And from the tool itself, you can contact the managers of the platform in case you have any issues.
Thank you, Agnes. I move to the next question. And there, in the second call, do you expect the development of software tools only, or hardware tools to measure visible and invisible features are welcome as well?
Maybe I can
Rickert?
try to give an answer here. That we do expect mainly software tools. This is what we have, what the focus should be on. Software tools that can be integrated into the cloud platform. Now, it does not explicitly prohibit. Maybe you need to do some small modifications to the hardware in order for it to be able to be used more easily, more robust, more cheap, or whatever. But the focus here is clearly on software tools, which should, as needed, then be able to connect to as much as possible standard hardware tools available out there.
Thank you. I now move on to, as a memory institution aggregator, should I upload my content both to Europeana and the cloud? What is your vision about sharing the content between the two?
Should I start?
Good, please.
The vision is clearly that these two infrastructures should be able to share data. We have this requirement in the call topics. We don't specify, though, exactly how it will happen. It's also possible that not all data can be shared because of the differences between the platforms, but yes, data should be shared, and you should not ideally be forced to upload your data in parallel to the platforms.
Thank you. Next question. One key for collaboration is standardization. Is expected that the base project also develops new ones for the cultural heritage area. Let me mention one first element. Well, there are already a number of standards available. Secondly, we need to follow the approach which was also specifically mentioned in the cultural heritage data space for Europe. Open access, interoperability are key features in that. Now, with these first elements, could I ask my colleagues for additional elements which might help to answer this question?
Maybe I should say that we expect the projects to, as much as possible, build on the standards which are developed and widely used already. It is not a specific target to develop new standards, but it may be necessary in certain cases. So it's not excluded.
Thank you. Now, next question. It's difficult to tell who are potential partners / PI from the long list of participants. Is there a place to add tags such as PI, partners, archives, etc.?
It's maybe related to the matchmaking tool, this question. This is what I can imagine, because it's not so clear. Actually, all participants who are expecting to be contacted via this tool should prepare their details via the tool, their detailed profiles. So I would suggest that in their profiles they include more details, whether they would like to be partners or third parties, or what is their type of participation level involved, and then it would be clearer for those who are looking for partners.
Yeah, so the more precise you are, well, the easier it is for the others to see if you are a potential partner or not.
Yes, this is my suggestion.
And I think the next question might also be a question for you, Agnes. I do not have any project to submit yet. I just wonder if I lost my chance to submit a new project proposal on this issue.
Well, we heard from Ricard that actually we are planning to have more projects related to the cloud. So we hope you have not lost your chance yet, and it's time to get prepared. And as we have heard, there are different levels of participations possible. So if you haven't submitted a project, maybe it's best to start as a practitioner, maybe to get to see more about the possibilities, to build up a network, to use maybe the existing tools, and to build up a better, more solid project for the long term. So I think there are different possibility types. Ricard? What do you suggest?
Maybe I can add to this because I think the question can be interpreted in different ways. If what you refer to is the project proposals under the topics that we have been discussed, there's still a lot of time. The deadline is the 21st of September, so the chance is not passed at all. If you mean submitting a project idea to the matchmaking platform, I think Agnes has already answered this question, but I don't know if you want to repeat, Agnes. It will still be possible in the future, right?
Yeah, the matchmaking tool is still open, so it's just time to prepare your profiles and submit your interest, what sort of partners or what kind of expertise you are offering.
You have not lost your chance.
No.
I think that it's fair to say that building up a consortium from scratch and putting in a proposal by September, then it's a relatively close call.
Yeah.
Because this is something that in our experience takes quite a long time. So if you have not done it already and you plan to propose something for the 21st of September, then please go ahead.
But there's also ways to participate as a partner. Maybe there are coordinators looking for additional participants, additional expertise on the matchmaking tool. So it's just a good occasion to go there and register.
Yeah, I think perhaps in addition to what Agnes is saying now, it's really not recommended to start as a coordinator of a project if you have not participated in the projects before. It's a very big hurdle, and it's something that takes experience to be able to run something like this, especially at the kind of scale that we are proposing here.
Thank you. So the next point. So the outline of existing projects/initiatives needs to be fit into 50-page proposal limit also. That is pretty challenging. Well, my answer is yes, indeed. It is pretty challenging. But what Agnes has also mentioned is that in some areas you will not be able to define everything in all details. Therefore, you need to outline these things. But when you outline them, you need to outline them in a way that the evaluators then can understand if what you outline will work or not. This is a challenge, but it's not a mission impossible, because in many other areas in our research program, we have very complex projects building up many complex things, and colleagues were able to manage this. So it's also possible in this area, but I agree it is challenging.
I think that the old saying is true, that it's more difficult to make a short proposal than a long one, because you need to frame your mind, and you simply need to have a vision for what you want to do and describe that vision. And then, of course, there's a 50-page page limit for the part B. But there is also, you can, as Agnes said, you can put in part of this information also in the part A where it's appropriate.
Then the next question is, do you have a feeling of how many proposals you expect for the big call? Now, first answer is no. But let me also mention that in particular for the one for the infrastructure, you need to have a really good and big consortium to be successful. Now, what I can tell you is that as far as the registrations for the matchmaking, for the exercise this morning is concerned, we have had a registration of some 200 persons. I do not yet have the exact figures, how many are now online. And Agnes, if I'm not mistaken, the registration for the matchmaking in the afternoon is also in the range of some 200. Yeah, so this could give you a first idea, but we can't go further than that in our guess how many proposals we will receive. Next point. Considering that the infrastructure should be fit for all kinds of artifacts, which standards should be used for which specific sectors? Well, we have already partly answered this question earlier on, but maybe Richard, if you would like to add something to this.
I can just add that you will need to build on different existing standards and find ways to use them together on the cloud platform, which in some cases may already have been defined and in other cases not. And this could lead again to the need of developing new standards in certain cases. But it should cover all the different kinds of artifacts within the cultural heritage sector, which not only physical artifacts, but also intangible or born digital, etc.
Thank you, Richard. The next point is about, does an online platform collecting and scaling innovations for people with disabilities, for example, education, political participation, living, I close the brackets, fit in cultural heritage or archive?
You understand the question?
I'm not sure if we fully grasped the question, but if the question is that if you want to add an element which should make it possible, in particular also for people with disabilities, to use the tools, this would of course be even more than welcome. I don't know if you would like to add anything to this.
If the question is whether, specifically, if an online platform collecting and scaling innovations for people with disabilities is counted as an cultural heritage archive, I think that's not a question we can answer straight off. There are definitions for what is cultural heritage, which is pretty wide, but it does not include everything. So I will leave it to these definitions.
Thank you, Richard. And then I see, for the time being, the last question. No, not yet. In the cloud, is it important that it has an interaction that will need speech processing technologies?
Should I?
Yeah.
As for the user interface, we don't believe that this is an important requirement. We are imagining more of a traditional user interface for the cloud. Now, in terms of processing cultural heritage objects, contents, you will probably need somewhere some tools for processing speech, but it's not. It's a very different thing, and I interpret this question is more referred to probably to the user interface, and there we don't foresee it.
And the next question is kind of linked to the previous one, namely, how about languages in the cloud? Main language English, translations?
I think that the way I've seen it for the Open Innovation Testbeds and the Digital Innovation Hubs, there are several permutations of this. Some are running mainly in English, but there are also these interactive translations going on directly that are using facilities like Google Translate directly. So I think that it's up to the proposals to come up with this. We should definitely not determine that the main language is English, even though we're speaking it here, because we are in a country, or we are in a part of the world with 28 different languages. So we should cater for as many of those as possible.
Let me add maybe that in the call topics, we do not specify which languages have to be used for the user interface. These requirements should be perhaps interpreted from the requirements on the platform to be inclusive, to be easily accessible for all cultural heritage institutions, professionals across Europe. But then again, this may not be automatically mean that everything has to be available in 24 official languages. So somewhere in between is probably but there's no official requirement on multilingualism on the platform. It just has to be easily accessible, inclusive for all Catalan professionals across Europe.
Indeed, it's up to the proposers of the cloud to determine this.
And argue also why.
Exactly.
Now, the next question is, besides the partner search and the matchmaking, is there any other way to search for consortia partners? Agnes, I could believe that this is a question for you.
Well, I can try to give more hints. Obviously, on the funding and tenders portal, there's one possibility. So if you go to the topic page, then you can put there your interests or offers in the partner search section of the topic. So that's one possibility, which is open until the call is open. And then if you go to the partner search section of the portal, then you can look for institutions, basically, which have participated already. You can put in keywords related to the cloud, look for specific country participation or type of participants, and then you can possibly find earlier participants if you are looking for experienced partners. Or again, besides the matchmaking tool, you can go to the different national contact points who can offer national help and probably show you the national interested parties. And if you visit National Information Days, I'm sure that you will meet other interesting partners who will help you to form your networks, which can lead to proposals later on.
Thank you, Agnes. And then we've got a question. Is there a data fetish among SMEs that serve the heritage industry, as well as other sectors? What is the strategy for including their data in the cloud?
I have no idea what a data fetish is.
Yeah, I have to admit, I did not fully grasp now the question.
Let me try to, if the sense is that SMEs are overly obsessive of ownership to data, this may be one possible interpretation. The cloud should be open for all actors involved in cultural heritage, but of course you cannot claim ownership for something which you don't own. On the other hand, if you own data, you will continue to own it on the cloud, and you will continue to have the power to decide how it should be used, how it should be shared, under which conditions.
Thank you, Richard. Now, the next point is the experienced partners in previous Cluster 2 projects might not have the expertise for this large artificial intelligence topic. The answer is yes. This is exactly the reason why we have made this specific info day for this specific call, because it goes beyond what we normally do in Cluster 2. Well, this is new, but it does not mean that this is an unsurmountable problem. It simply is you need to widen your approach and to find novel solutions also to novel challenges.
As I mentioned before, with the open innovation test beds that were running in Horizon 2020 and the digital innovation hubs, and they are continued in the European digital innovation hubs in Digital Europe program. I mean, there's lots and lots of experience with running such platforms. We, in the open innovation test beds and industrial technologies, we had some 300 million euros worth of projects, and I think even for the open innovation test beds, it was even bigger than that. So there's a lot of experience out there, and that means if you're looking, as Harald just said, outside the community that is inside Cluster 2, then you should also be able to find partners that have this expertise.
Thanks very much, Søren. Now, this concludes the questions and answers part of our session this morning. And before concluding the meeting, I hand over to Agnes. Agnes, you could give us some further information about the matchmaking exercise this afternoon. And I think what is of particular interest is when do we start in the afternoon and how can one access it?
Yes, thank you, Harald. So actually this matchmaking event is going on already because the platform is open. You can find on the slides the access point, and also on the event website there's a link to the matchmaking event where you can register your profile, I would say as quickly as possible, because the matchmaking takes a while, and also you need to give some time to the partners to find you. This matchmaking event is run by the Net for Society project, which is a Horizon Europe funded project. And it's a network of NCPs that are running the platform, actually. I'm the project officer from the Research Executive Agency, and I can give you a brief outline of the tool and what to expect. The next slide, please. So this is a fully online tool, and that's the benefit of this possibility compared to the previous actions. So it's not just a one-time action when you have 2 hours to meet the different partners, but actually you can go to this online platform, register yourself, and then you will be able to find partners until the call deadline. It's really a good opportunity for those coordinators or who have already established networks to extend their networks and maybe fill in some additional profiles that are needed in the consortium. And it's also a good opportunity for newcomers to start and grow their networks and maybe get involved in different activities, even for future occasions. So the call deadline is on 21st of September, and until then the platform will be open, and even afterwards actually we will be able, or they will be able to keep it open. The next slide, please. Each meeting will last for 20 minutes, which is just the starting possibility of all the contacts. There will be video calls managed online, fully online. The technical needs are described on the platform. Of course, you need to have a webcam and a microphone installed. And if you are not able to go to a meeting, please cancel in advance so that people wouldn't be waiting for you in vain. And yeah, the session starts officially at 1 o'clock. You can see there the agenda, but actually you can go to the tool, and if you have any problems, then you can contact the managers from the tool itself. And there's also a detailed description how the tool works. You can click on the link later on to watch it. So I wish you a nice matchmaking event if you are participating, and please use the occasion as much as possible. Thank you, Harald.
Well, thank you very much, Agnes. And this concludes now our session of the Info Day on the Cultural Heritage Cloud 2023. And as we have seen during the presentation and also during the questions, it is a rather complex subject matter. And with this, we leave the usual way of dealing with topics and of preparing proposals. On the other hand, it opens up a completely new dimension in the field of cultural heritage, namely that we not only enter the digital age in our collaboration, but that we also make very best use of all these opportunities. And I should thank you for having taken part in this meeting, for having asked so many very useful questions. I should also thank my colleagues here in the studio, Rickard, Søren and Agnes, for their presentations and for answering all these questions. I hope that this session has been useful for you, that this will inspire you in participating in the forming of consortia. And let me also recall that this call is open until the 21st of September. And after this, we will have a specific call for the cloud in 2024 and a third one in 2025. And with this, I thank you and I invite you to join into the matchmaking exercise starting at 1 o'clock this afternoon. Very many thanks.